Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eid Jarrar. I lead the advocacy effort with AMP, American Muslims for Palestine. I'm also joined with another co-host today, our friend Donna from the Rebuilding Alliance. Donna, would you like to introduce yourself? I think you're muted.
My name is Donna Baranski-Walker. I'm the Executive Director of Rebuilding Alliance. I'm really honored to have this opportunity to bring our speakers forward, and I look forward to introducing them. Rebuilding Alliance has been working with Palestinian and Israeli NGOs to help restore Palestinian rights, and we've been doing this for close to 20 years. Our efforts are very much focused on advocacy as well as aid, and our aid it extends into Gaza and into the West Bank, also Jerusalem. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to bringing this forward and hoping to showcase solutions to these very difficult problems.
As I said, my name is Eid Jarrar, and I am the Advocacy Director with American Muslims for Palestine. We are holding this event today in collaboration with the Rebuilding Alliance because it's an extremely volatile moment for Palestine, for the situation in Israel-Palestine. As we saw, the Trump administration took unprecedented moves in the last few weeks, the last few months, the last few years that we haven't seen before, moves that impacted lives on the ground. Most recently, we have been tracking a number of disastrous developments, including the Trump administration's recognition of settlements and other awful policies introduced by this outgoing administration. Two of the most recent issues that we have seen, and the Congress has been tracking as well, is the rise of COVID cases, COVID-19 cases in Gaza, and the rise of home demolitions by Israel in the West Bank. So our speakers today will be speaking about both of these tracks and other developments. We will be joined now by Congressman Pocan. Unfortunately, Congressman Pocan will not be joining us live today because of a vote commitment that came up last minute, but he sent us an amazing video that we're going to play in a minute. Congressman Pocan represents the 2nd district in Wisconsin. He is one of our closest allies and leaders in Congress. He is a co-chair currently for the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We're very grateful for his leadership on many issues. As you will see, he has led so many letters and communications and statements this year pertaining to Palestinian rights. So let's listen in to what Congressman Pocan's video says, and we can comment on it after
that. Hi there, this is Representative Mark Pocan. While I'm unable to join the town hall with you today, I wanted to thank American Muslims for Palestine and the Rebuilding Alliance for hosting this important event. Over the last 4 years of the Trump administration, we've watched them undermine decades of U.S. foreign policy by cutting off humanitarian aid to Gaza and the West Bank, shutting down the Palestinians' diplomatic office in D.C., and moving the U.S. Embassy. I've worked closely with various organizations to raise the humanitarian crisis occurring in Gaza due to the decade-long blockade and crisis. I'm sure you're all well aware, but I will list a few harrowing statistics about the current situation in Gaza. 97% of all water in Gaza is undrinkable due to the deterioration of its only aquifer. Over 50% of the people in Gaza are unemployed. 50% of children live below the poverty line, living on less than $2 a day. 80% of Gaza's population depends on international assistance to survive, and 68% of Gaza's population experiences moderate or severe food insecurity. These statistics are only compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. With your support, I've led multiple letters and held briefings to lift up the voices of Gazans and raise awareness about the humanitarian crisis they face. Back in February, we hosted a briefing with Oxfam on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and I led a letter with my colleague, Representative Debbie Dingell. The letter, signed by over 30 members, urged Secretary Pompeo to release the $125 billion in congressionally approved funds to the West Bank and Gaza, as well as funding for UNRWA. Then COVID-19 hit. And while Gaza was spared at first, we're seeing the dire consequences of the blockade combined with the global pandemic. In October, COVID cases skyrocketed in Gaza, and there was an 84% increase in 1 month. I led another letter to Secretary Pompeo urging his immediate release of humanitarian and medical assistance to Gaza and the West Bank with 35 of my colleagues. The State Department did send $5 million for medical assistance, but there's still much more that's needed. Since November 1st, cases in Gaza have quadrupled, and they're straining an already weak healthcare system. You'll be hearing directly from medical providers in Gaza about the on-the-ground experience of providing treatment for COVID-19 and the importance of U.S. assistance to prevent further suffering. You'll also hear from Palestinians living in the West Bank whose homes are under threat of demolition by the Israeli military. There's another issue I've been active on in Congress. It's critical that we express our opposition to the demolition of Palestinian homes and communities in the West Bank as a violation of international human rights. In March, I joined 64 of my colleagues on a letter to Secretary Pompeo to oppose the Israeli government's acceleration of home demolitions and displacement of Palestinian communities in the West Bank. We also requested the State Department to examine Israeli compliance with the requirements applied by the Arms Export Control Act in order to ensure that the United States supplied equipment is not being used to destroy Palestinian homes. Then in June, my colleagues and I wrote to Ambassador Friedman urging him to condemn the rise in violence against Palestinians in the West Bank by Israeli settlers. Reports indicate a 78% increase in violent incidents against Palestinians by settlers in just the last 2 weeks of March alone. Most recently in November, I led a letter to Secretary Pompeo with 40 of my colleagues expressing grave concern about the Israeli government's recent demolitions of a Palestinian Bedouin community by the Jordan Valley. These acts are a serious violation of international law that destroyed homes and displaced 73 people, including 41 children. Creeping annexation cannot be a policy that the U.S. government supports if we wish to see peace in this region. That was Israel's largest demolition of Palestinian homes in the last 4 years, and it was only possible because of the continued silence from the American government. I'll continue to lift up Palestinian voices and stand up for their right to self-determination. I will continue to oppose the violation of their human rights. I look forward to continuing to work with you all as the Biden-Harris administration comes into office. Thank you for allowing me to provide opening remarks for this important town hall. And again, my sincere apologies for not being able to participate today.
Well, thank you again to Congressman Pocan. As you all heard, the Congressman has taken so much action this year. Just now, he mentioned a letter that he wrote in around March, alongside 64 members of Congress regarding home demolition. Around the same time, he hosted a briefing with Oxfam on Gaza's humanitarian aid. Another letter to the State Department urging Secretary of State Pompeo to release millions of West Bank and Gaza to humanitarian aid with 30 members of Congress. Another letter in June regarding violations against Palestinians in the West Bank. Another one in October, again to Secretary Pompeo regarding the release of humanitarian aid. Another one in November, believe it or not, another letter to Pompeo in November with 40 members of Congress regarding the demolitions of Bedouin homes in Jordan Valley. I think what is even more shocking is that the Department of State, Secretary Pompeo, have not said a single word on all of these letters. It's a State Department that has gone completely with no checks and balances. It is not recognizing the congressional constitutional role of oversight it is ignoring congressional letters, not a single word from the U.S. Department of State with all of these letters. So we appreciate the congressman's leadership. We appreciate every member of Congress, from the dozens and dozens of members of Congress who have communicated with the Trump administration. We will press this administration to stop its violations and answer these letters in the upcoming few weeks, the last few weeks in office. But we will definitely continue our pressure on the upcoming administration. And that's what we want. That's what we want from all of you, to continue the pressure on the U.S. government to stop supporting violations by Israel. I will hand it over to Donna now, who will introduce our panelists from the ground in Palestine. So Donna, you have.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to bring our speakers from Gaza and the West Bank and Israel also, because I want you to hear their voices. I would like to start with the Gaza team on this call, Dr. Yasser Abu Jamal. I was honored to bring Dr. Yasser to speak in the US after hearing of both his experiences during the bombings of 2014 and his important role at the head of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. Rebuilding Alliance had been working with Gaza Community Mental Health since 2003, when we first began our Rachel Corrie rebuilding campaign in Gaza. And it was wonderful to see Dr. Yasser take the role of the director of the Director General of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. I want to say that Dr. Yasser Abu Jamal is a Palestinian psychiatrist who obtained his degree, MSc in clinical neuropsychiatry with distinction from Birmingham University. In 2015, he received the award of Best Alumnus Achievement from the Said Foundation on his work in developing the mental health sector in Gaza and the Gaza Community Crisis Response Plan after the 2014 war on Gaza. He also received Alumnus of the Year from the University of Birmingham in 2016. Dr. Abu Jamal is a member of the task force that developed the National Mental Health Strategy in Palestine. He's keenly interested in capacity building programs, neuropsychiatry, advocacy, lobbying activities. He's certainly a trainer of trainers in the field of supervision and care for caregivers at the Free University of Berlin. Thank you very much. I welcome you, Dr. Yasser Abu Jamal.
Thank you very much, Donna and Ahmed. Let me begin by thanking AMP and Rebuilding Alliance for the arrangement of this event. It's much appreciated. And let me begin by thanking Congressman Pocan, who made a very brief but well-articulated introduction. He mentioned a lot of the facts that speak about the conditions in Gaza Strip. I work for a place that's called the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. It's the biggest or the largest non-governmental organization that provides mental health services. And I'd like to give you a briefing about how the life of Gazans look nowadays. Well, to begin with, when you mentioned the word Gaza Strip, there are many things that could immediately appear in your mind, and most of them, unfortunately, are tragic. Let us say that this is a place that is under occupation since more than 7 decades, 72 years ago. And this is a place that is under blockade since more than 13 years. This is the place that was, even during the blockade, was experienced 3 large-scale military operations in 2008, 9, 2012, and 2014. And during 2018 and half of 2019, we had the Great March for Return demonstrations that unfortunately was met with excessive power by the Israeli army, leading to a lot of casualties. Actually, more than 29,000 people were injured and a few hundreds were killed. And once the year 2020 began, we are now living under the crisis of the COVID COVID-19? Well, it's a chronic condition. The stresses that are affecting the population are really chronic ones. 70% of the population in Gaza Strip are refugees, people who were uprooted from the historical Palestine. About 1.4 million people are refugees. And let me say how, for example, life for a mother looked like about a year ago. That's how our mothers work. That's how our wives work. That's how our future, hopefully, well, fortunately, our future daughters will experience a better life. But the idea was that she would wake up really in the early morning, something like 5:30 or 6, and start preparing her children for the school. Schools here operate on 2 shifts because of the crowdedness of the schools. On average, we have about 45 to 50 children per school class. And on average, we have about 5 children per family. That's not few, but it used to be a lot more than that. So the family will or the mother will simply prepare breakfast, and then her children will go to the school. And a couple of hours later, or like 3 hours later, then they work for the afternoon shift, because there are some other children who have to go to schools, which was again another challenge. Well, prepare the food, get them prepared, clothing, etc., etc. So they leave to the school. The first shift returns back home. She has now to take care of lunch, and then the second shift gets back like 3 hours later, etc., etc. That's the daily life, and it's 6 days a week, not 5 days a week. And on top of that, you will find, for example, the husband or the fathers or the brother or people who are not going to schools, who need also their own needs. And unfortunately, most of those needs lies on the burden or in the shoulder of the housewife. Now imagine that those women have to do all of these activities, and in the same time, they need to deal with the issue that we have only on average 8 hours electricity per day. So if she needs a washing machine, if she needs to iron something, she needs to arrange that everything goes in line with her tight schedule of working with the first shift students, the second shift students, and the rest of the family. And unfortunately, in many cases, when things deteriorate further and further, or there is a small escalation, then you lose power supply, and it's like almost only 4 hours a day, during which it's almost impossible to work your just very basic activities. Now with the COVID-19, things have really changed a lot. Schools, children were not to go to schools from March until a couple of months ago, when children started to resume going to schools. And during those days, which is like 7 or 8 months, children were all the time staying at home. And people are instructed to avoid being the spread of the disease, the spread of the pandemic. That's why you need to stay at home all the time. What does that look like? Well, one might imagine that this brought a lot of let me say, calmness to the housewife or to the mothers. Well, no, it's a different story now. Children are forced to stay at home the whole day, and they don't really understand why, or they understand but they don't like it. We live in one of the most or the loudest areas around the globe, with more than 5,000 people per square kilometers. 70%, as I said, are refugees. They live in refugee camps. It's not made of tents, of course, but it's a very crowded, tiny area where the camps are, where people live in the camps. And imagine how come that those people can go outside, or when they are not allowed to go outside, how can they deal with the challenges that of staying at home? One of our services that we have are the toll-free line. And since March, we started to receive more phone calls. A lot of people, as we expect, all talk out of anxiety, out of worrisome about getting infection or getting the disease, and how can we deal with that? How can we speak to the elderly? How can we protect ourselves? What about patients? We have a very fragile health system that is already developed, that is already suffering. The question is among the families. How can we help our disabled people? How can we help our elderly people? How can we help people with cancer patients? How can we help people with permanent disabilities? That is something also another cause of despair and another cause of anxieties among the population. They all talk about that. A couple of months ago, schools resumed. One day you go to school, the second day you work from home or you study from home. Well, imagine that those mothers, again, they need to make sure that their children, 4 or 5, each one of them has access to internet, that has WhatsApp, for example, or that has, for example, classrooms program, because that's how the online system works. Now tell me, how can we provide all of that to a family of 5 children that are under the poverty rate, as Congressman Pocan said, less than $2 a day? How can we ensure the continuity of internet if there is no power supply? How can we continue to do that? And again, children, they learn by heart that to work, you need to go to school. School is a place where you work. Houses is the place where you play. Home is where you play. Now it's not like that. And then again, mothers have to struggle with their children. A lot of that struggle is now a global one. We all know about it, which is, in a sense, brought some of the realities of Gaza Strip to the population around the globe. When we used to speak about how difficult it is to be restricted on movement, when you are not allowed, or only few hundreds of people are allowed to leave Gaza Strip on daily basis, in a population of 2 million people, when less than 500 can live per day, how can we live with that? Well, no one could imagine. Now we all understand what does it mean. We all understand how difficult life is when you don't have the capacity to travel, to move around, when you are restricted of movement. Another very frustrating issue that we started to see in the community. Now, a lot of stresses, a lot of tension, in addition to the economic conditions that people are struggling with, in addition to the lack of hope that things are deteriorating, in addition to more bad news that is coming. The most recent one is that the UNRWA might not be able to pay the full salaries of its staff, not only in Gaza, but in its 5 regions. When I think UNRWA is the second biggest employer of people in the Gaza Strip. These all very, bad news. They do a severe psychological impact, because they mean that hope is far from being close, that the end of the tunnel is getting farther and farther. And this is again adding to the frustration of the population, the frustration of the people. One of the very urgent issues that we start to deal with, the talks about the children suffering at homes, because there are not a lot of them, but there are cases of change in the behavior of children. So children stop to listen to their parents. And unfortunately, in some cases, those parents, they use abuse, unfortunately, to deal with their children, because they don't understand really what does it mean that the child doesn't listen to you, because simply the child is looking for more care. Nowadays, we see more cases of bedwetting. Young children started again to wet their bed during the night. Why? Because they need more attention, and because they are afraid, and because they are anxious. And unfortunately, now we see on Facebook, there are a lot of, how cases now, the spread of the disease. Well, a few weeks ago, we had only about 40 cases per day, 40 to 50, something like that. And a couple of weeks ago, it raised to 400 to 500 cases per day. Nowadays, we have about 800 to 900 cases per day. You can say that 800 is not much, but let's keep in mind that this is out of 2 million people. And, if you measure it to the states, that's almost something like 120,000 people per day out of the 300 million population. And then the other thing, they say everyone has the feeling that it's a matter of time. Getting infected with COVID-19 is just a matter of time, and that there is nothing to do about it. So there is a lot of frustration in the community. And we all the time say that our major role is to deal with that frustration and to try to find strength points in the lives of people, whether those are children or adults, fathers or mothers, people who struggle, workers who work from from hand to mouth, etc., etc. But we also need a change. We need something that would change the realities of the daily living conditions in Gaza Strip. We need to end the siege or the blockade that is imposed on Gaza Strip now for 13 years. We need to restore the funding that stopped a lot of UNRWA activities and that hindered and made the lives of the population who are receiving basic support. We speak about health, we speak about education, we speak about poverty. That's what UNRWA does. That's very important to maintain and to keep and to restore. And we need to work harder on the huge picture, on the bigger picture, which is that it's a human rights. We cannot continue to allow human rights violations to happen in any place, including Gaza Strip, including Palestine. We need to show the respect for human rights. We need to end the violations. And we need, of course, to end the occupation. Thank you very much.
Questions on this segment after Dr. Mhanna's talk. I want to introduce Dr. Mhanna in just a moment, but I'd like to say that certainly ending the blockade of Gaza would go a long way toward restoring everyone's income and ability to survive, given and avoid this level of poverty. Let me turn our attention to Dr. Ahmed Mhanna, who's joining us also from Gaza. Dr. Mhanna is the medical director of the Union of Health Work Committees, and he's the medical director specifically of Awda Hospital, the second largest hospital in Gaza, and also a non-governmental organization. He is the consultant anesthetist with ongoing responsibility for patients under his care, as well as providing consultation and advisory services to his other clinical colleagues. Prior to this February, it was actually from February 2007 to 2010, he was the resident anesthetist at the Kuban State Medical University in Russia. He's also done his medical training, his education in Milano, Italy, and holds a master's degree in anesthesiology and intensive care from Kuban Medical Government University, St. Petersburg. His wide connections and networks in the medical sector is with representatives and key players in Palestine and globally.
Alert from Google Chrome.
His considerable experience in medical organizations management and medical staff leadership and wide experience with medical organizations in managing emergency situations and disaster risk management is really unparalleled. Thank you very much, Dr. Mhanna, for joining us for our call. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Donna, for your arrangements for this meeting, and I want to thank other colleagues. First, I want say that about the condition in Gaza in general, Mr. Yasser, he explained very well the condition and reality in Gaza sector. And actually, I have nothing to add except the medical condition in the official medical condition in Gaza and the medical condition in our organization. About the official medical condition in Gaza Strip, the system is suffering since long time, since more than 14 or 15 years from a siege mainly. It's very important to note that the siege produced the decrease of stock in many items of drugs and stocks, consumables, mainly in the Ministry of Health stores, and it's reflect the services on primary and secondary healthcare in the Ministry of Health. It's very important, especially the cancer patients and renal failure patients and pediatric patients. It's in general, regardless to the pandemic situation recently here in Gaza, the condition is critical. I mean critical because the number of infected people is increasing day by day, and the capacity in the Ministry of Health and the health organizations, governmental and non-governmental, they cannot tolerate this huge number of patients, and they are seriously thinking to close or to make some procedures to limit the movements in the street to break down the pandemic more in Gaza. Actually, we have limited facilities in the ministry and in the governmental hospitals. We have 3 main hospitals in the Ministry of Health in Gaza, and one in the Gaza city, which include 550 beds, Shifa Hospital, and European Hospital include 200 beds, but it was increased for 500 beds finally and specified for Corona. And Turkish hospital in the middle area, it's regarding to isolated patients, but we need more beds and more hospitals. We have very limited number of intensive care beds. We have in the European hospital about 100 beds and 50 in other hospitals, including the NGOs, and it's a very limited number to treat because the 5% of infected people in Gaza, they need advanced medical care, and included the intensive care management also. So it's a disaster for our population if the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Interns, they cannot decide urgently how they can break this rapidly spreading of infection. About the medical condition in Gaza, regardless to our organization as Union Health Work Committees, we are doing now the maximum effort to working together with the Ministry of Health in complementary with the Ministry of Health, and we providing services in many aspects. First one, it's a medical aspect. It's the main aspect and main target. It's primary health care. We are providing through 6 primary health care centers among Gaza Strip, and secondary and primary, secondary, tertiary medical services in Awda Hospital in the northern area, Beit Lahia in Gaza. And second aspect, it's a psychosocial. We're providing these services in our centers and in the hospital. Third aspect, it's advocacy and protection. The last one, the protection through the program, big program in our centers and our hospital. Actually, there is a big number of beneficiaries. They cannot reach the hospital, especially the marginalized people who is living so far from the hospital. We thought about how can we reach for these people, and we moved 3 mobile clinic, one in north of Gaza and 1 mobile in Gaza City, a third one in Middle Camp. Actually, they are running every day and seeing about from 50 to 60 patients per day. One of the mobile clinic interested in the reproductive health and maternity, and in north of Gaza and middle area, interested in the to diagnose and treat the isolated coronavirus patients or peoples. We move and we improve the many programs to provide services for marginalized people in Al Awda hospital with minimal charge or free of charge. And we have partnership with the UNRWA actually and the other humanitarian fund to provide operation services for the people who's in waiting list in the Ministry of Health, because the ministry now closed the outpatient clinic and closed many services because they have shortening in staff, and they're concentrating to manage how they can deal with this crisis. I can understand. Yes, they need a big number of human resources. And actually, we are in the northern area. We take this responsibility in our organization, and we take all the least operations waiting list in the Ministry of Health in the northern area and part of Gaza City, and it's okay, working well. Al Awda Hospital, we have, it's a challenge to work in this condition, elective work and normal outpatient clinics, and you have pandemic. So we put a program in Al Awda Hospital, and we make an isolation area in front of the hospital, and we are doing a rapid test for each patient coming to the hospital, and for the mid personnel, the human resources who is working in the Awda, each 7 days we are testing, and another measurement, traditional measurement, what they know, everyone know in the hospitals, the PPEs and the alcohol gel in each department, and etc. etc. We completely respected the effort from the side NGOs and Ministry of Health to deal with the pandemic, but our aim and our role as third NGOs medical in Gaza Strip, we will do our best to provide the services, even if the Minister of Interior closed the sector Gaza. We will reach the patients through the hotline in the marginalized area, especially, and in Gaza City. Yeah, that's it. Thanks
for your comments. I want to say that there is a way to help. From the outside, Rebuilding Alliance has been able to send aid. We helped with the rapid testing kits, being able to get the PPEs to the hospitals has been really important. Dr. Mhanna, are there particular things that are needed now? What's the most important thing that the hospital needs now?
Yeah, actually, not only the non-governmental, but also every structure, medical structure in this pandemic needs support. And we are many thanks for Rebuilding Alliance, because they support us in many items to protect our staff and our patients from the COVID virus. And actually, the union looking for more support. I am not political man, but I am a doctor, and I'm asking the American people to support our just Palestinian that we trust in population in all the world. And we know that our facilities in Palestine, especially in Gaza, very limited to fight with like this COVID pandemic, COVID-19. So we are really appreciated your effort and other partners who are supporting us in this pandemic.
And Dr. Yasser, how are your team continuing during COVID? Social distancing with mental health, like, are you doing more on the hotline? And what do you need from the outside world?
Well, we experienced, I think, 2 weeks where the Gaza was under lockdown. That was in the last week of August and first week of September. What we did was we tried to move a lot of our services, that's consultations and psychotherapy, to through using a toll-free line, because we have a toll-free line that people can call free of charge. And of course, we asked our clinicians to call directly their clients, the patients. Also, we managed to get the permits from the Ministry of Health to move around, which allowed our nurses to spread and distribute the medications to the patients who are in need for their medications, because when there is a lockdown, then patients will not be able to come to our community centers. Our 3 community centers were operating more or less, and now we are still operating, taking into consideration all the hygiene and sanitization requirements that would really ensure minimal possibility of spreading the infection. Also, we took different measures in order to reduce the number of patients who are present at the same time in our community centers. And luckily, we continue to work according to those measures and to help as many people as possible. Interestingly, in this year, we have another increase in the number of patients who are coming to our community centers. It increased the number of patients who came in 2015 already, which is very interesting. So we see more people that are psychologically affected, even more than what we had in 2015 after the last large-scale operation in Gaza Strip. The team are doing their best. We have a lot of work on providing supportive supervision or care for caregivers, because this is very important to pay attention to our own staff, to our own people. Also, our own staff are making this activity of providing care for caregivers to people who are working in another organizations. Now we supervise about another, I think, 20 people working in different organizations, and we provide them with some sort of like allowing them to empty their cup and prepare them to continue to work without the stresses that we have. So one more or the other, we continue to operate. Of course, if we could ask something, it's an ask on behalf of the whole Palestinian people. What we really need is to have improvement in the living conditions of the population in Gaza Strip. Any improvement in the living conditions will a lot improve the living, the psychological well-being of the population, and will definitely help us even improve or work in improving the conditions of the patients and the clients who call us. Of course, in terms of support, we are a well-known internationally organization, Gaza Community Mental Program. We are known for being non-partisan. We have different European and American donors, and we look for further and more donations and contribution, and part of that came through Rebuilding Alliance in previous years, and we look forward towards the continuity of this support.
And Donna, before we move to our second panel here, I really want to emphasize something that our guests said and you said, which is this is a humanitarian crisis that is caused by a blockade, that there is a political crisis behind this, and there is an occupation behind this. So I think, while we zoom in to issues of humanitarian concern, we're also keeping in mind that the root cause for suffering in Gaza goes back to the ongoing blockade and occupation. I really appreciate everything that our guest said on this first panel.
It is really important to remember that that, and as in any place, not everybody voted for the group that's in charge. That there's a diversity of people. That people, families should never be targeted in any way. That a blockade impacts, it's as a form of collective punishment that goes across the board. And that said, there are ways to help. There's immediate ways to provide aid and to be to also press for relief, for being able to end the restrictions that are in place. And we are seeing sometimes a bit of change in these areas. Some things do begin to happen. But in the interest of time, I'm really glad to bring us forward now and speak to the second issue. We want to be able to talk about the West Bank now and about some of the challenges that are being faced there. I'm very happy to welcome Eid Abu Khamis Jahalin. He's joining us. He's a spokesperson for Khan Al Ahmar, Khan Al Ahmar, the village that's been a Bedouin village that's being targeted for demolition, for forced relocation, and in a case that's been ongoing for quite a while. There were a new court hearing on Sunday, certainly ongoing concerns about what will happen to Khan Al Ahmar. And maybe one of the most important things to remember when thinking about this is the challenge that the village itself should have its right to plan its future, like any other town. Planning rights are something that American values hold dear. That towns, what do? They do zoning plans. They are able to decide on their future entirely. Mr. Eid Abu Khamis has been the spokesperson for quite a long time of his village. It's a Jahalin community of 8,000 Bedouins. He was born in Khan Al Ahmar and lives there with his wife and children. The Jahalin were displaced from Tel Arad in the Negev desert in 1951. And Mr. Abu Khamis still owns land there and in his family's name. He's been a spokesperson, has come to visit Congress. We're building alliance. We're really proud to have brought him to speak to Congress. And he's also addressed the EU and numerous human rights forums as well. I welcome you, Eid Abu Khamis. Please go ahead.
Welcome. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I am born here. I am living in this villages, but after 1 week ago, the case court, he is a judge. He taking the government 7 months. A lot of people, he is think the villages, he is staying now. Everything is good after 7 months, but after 1 day, the soldiers and a lot of people from the government, he is coming and he's supporting all the people in my village, and he's taking how many square meter from all the home from the people. This is it's very, very dangerous now.
So what you're saying is that the court case on Sunday, the court said that there'll be 7 months before they will decide what will happen with Khan Al Ahmar. But the next day, the soldiers came, and they measured each person's land, and they registered each person to know everyone in the village. Yeah.
But before 5 years ago, another communities, the case court, he taking the case. The community stay 3 months, but after 1 week, the soldier is coming and demolishing all the community. This is before 5 years ago. The soldiers here, he is making what he do. He don't listen from his case court.
So that no matter what the court is saying, the soldiers might act independently. They might do something different.
Yes, he is. Why he is coming after 1 day, and he is support. He is supporting the people all the time, all the time. Why he coming after 1 day? He support how many families, how many people in the family in the and the village, and why he taking the how many houses and the how many house 100 meter 120. He's taking them how many meters better from the homes, all the cities, in all the cities.
When you came to talk to Congress, you talked about the plan that Khan Al Ahmar wants. Can you tell us what Khan Al Ahmar would prefer? What is it that the villagers want?
This is the village. This is private land. He is from a village from near here, Hanata. My tribe is coming. He's coming here in this corridor in 20 after the end of 52. Why the Bedouin he stay in this area all the time? The Bedouin in all the world he liking three things: water and big area and taking his milk and sheep and all the things to the city. Here, before here, here my village is here. 20 minutes you are taking the car in the Jerusalem. After around here, the Wadi Cult is full of spring water, and he before.
So looks like
from here and to that my tribe he stay here all the time. The here number one he's building the settlers the border from the settler 10 meters from my villages. Another side, this is area military. He putting a lot of pressure from my community to leave. Why he liking to leave my villages? Because he building a lot of settlers. He like to connect between the settlers here, Maladomim and Faradomim and another settlers here. When he closing this area, is all from Azariah to Dead Sea, any villages or any camps from Palestine. As he is liking to cutting the West Bank, this is the idea from all the government from Israel and the settlers.
So it's the challenge of the E1 corridor.
Yes, this is not a problem from how many villages, how many people, how many family Bedouins is living here, or a school here, or anything here. This is a problem when he demolishing this village, as he cutting the West Bank. He going to cutting the West Bank and closing the Jerusalem.
So let me ask Alon to comment, because I know you've been working with Bimkom and with Alon about the planning and about what the alternatives can be for the planning. I want to introduce Alon Cohen-Lifshitz, an architect and urban planning who leads Bimkom's activities in the West Bank. He's joined Bimkom in 2004, working directly with Palestinian villages to appeal decisions imposed by the Israeli civil administration and change Israeli planning policy regarding Palestinians in Area C of the West Bank. Alon is a graduate of Belazal Academy of Art and Design. He's also studied art for social change and recently received a Master's of Arts in International Community Development from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's also been working with local organizations of slums and shack dwellers in Namibia and in Kenya. Welcome, Alon.
Hi, thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. I will be very brief since we don't have too much time. But built on what just Eid said and what our colleagues from Gaza, I think that in the West Bank, we are facing another pandemic, which is the demolitions. So recently, we're facing a huge increase in home demolitions, and Israel improved its ability to demolish many structures almost every day, and they already invent a kind of mechanism which actually prevent the options for Palestinians to object. And so, what we learned from Khan Al Ahmar, that home demolition is one side of the story, but the fear from demolition, which many people are suffering from, is another issue which actually nobody really think about. And when we're talking about the numbers, we can see that since Israel determined Area C, since Oslo Accord, Israel issued about 20,000 demolition orders for Palestinian structures, and since then demolished almost 5,000 structures. So when we are talking about demolition, it's not just like a home vanish. It's children which are going to school in the morning and are coming back and they cannot find their home because it was demolished. Or even there is a worst case scenario, which they are sleeping and early in the morning, the army are coming and demolish their houses. They're giving them like 2 minutes to take all the belonging. So it's really something which many Palestinians are suffering from, and it's related as well to the Israeli policy. And the reason which Israel is demolishing the structure is because they don't have a permit. But on the other end, Israel is not giving any permits for Palestinians. These days, you can find out that less than 1% of the applications for building permits are being approved. And for Palestinians in Area C, they have only about 0.5% of Area C to build in. So like there are not any places for build legally, because Israel prepares some plans, but it's almost nothing. Like for a comparative perspective, if we are thinking about the settlements, the settlements has plans which cover about 26% of Area C, which is 50 times larger than the area of Palestinians' plans. And we can see a lot of discrimination in the planning system with military order, which changed the planning and building law and created the situation that Palestinians don't have any representation in the planning system, while the settlers have full representation in the planning system. There is the issue of land policy, which actually Israel manipulates the existing laws with creating all kinds of mechanism which actually taking land from Palestinians and allocated it exclusively for Israeli interest, and of course, mainly for settlements. So Khan Al Ahmar is only one case out of many, because these communities, what we call the mobile pastoralists, the other communities, are the ones who suffer most from the Israeli policy, because Israel is not recognized the way of life and actually want to concentrate them in areas which is adjacent to areas A and B, and doesn't allow them to have any options to get access to grazing area, to natural resources, and to water. And it's not, it doesn't, like Israel is just willing to move most of the Palestinians in Area C to areas A and B. So this is the main idea behind the demolition. So from one hand, you don't give a permits, and then from the other end, you're demolishing the thousands of buildings. It's really irrational, or the rationale is that you are actually fighting the people. And what you can say, I will end it with saying that actually Israel is using planning as a weapon. It's way to conquer areas. You don't need a tank or a rifle. You can just use planning laws and planning policy to occupy territories and displace people. And this is the case of Khan Al Ahmar and many other communities. And with the case of the plan for Khan Al Ahmar that you asked, Donna, we submitted a few alternatives a long time ago, and there was a new version just 2 years ago. Since today, we didn't have any serious response to that. And the main issue is that Israel claimed that this land is not belong to the community. Although it's state land that can be allocated for the community, Israel is not thinking about that.
Well, thank you so much, Alon. And we actually have a question for you from one of our Palestine Advocacy Corps members. It's a team that AMP maintains for super activists. So Safa from our Palestine Advocacy Corps asks that the question is that they understand that there are approximately 150 children currently attending a school at Khan Al Ahmar, and the question is about whether there are any special measures for this school zone. You're mentioning how zoning is becoming very political. So the question is, are there any considerations for the school zoning in this whole battle about demolition? I think you're muted, Alon.
I think especially in time of COVID-19, we are facing that these communities are suffering from the lack of options to go to the schools. They cannot really have education remotely. They barely have solar panels which can give them some electricity, barely internet, and of course many of them don't have any laptops. So their only option is to study physically in a school. And we can see now that there are about more than 50 schools of communities, Bedouin communities, which are under the threat of demolitions. And we are doing what we can to prevent it with submitting plans, objections, and expert opinions with petitions to prevent demolitions of schools.
Facing imminent threat of demolitions. There is a request coming in from our audience about your school, the Tire School in Khan Al Ahmar. Are they going to school now during this COVID? Or what's happening with the children? And Eid, how many children are there at the school?
The school is now working. All the children is coming to the school, and the COVID at now is any people is don't sneak in this COVID, and he is going to demolishing not the school from the Khan Al Ahmar. When a lot of people he say he is going to demolishing the school Khan Al Ahmar, but he is after the demolition. 63 demolishing in the West Bank, and another two schools from my tribe, Abu Nawar, and another school, another school. He's going to demolishing him. Not my school is going to demolishing. He's going to demolishing 63 schools in the West Bank in Area C. Another say.
So one thing that I want to emphasize to everyone on the line who's listening in is, as a constituent, someone in because you live in your congressional district, your member of Congress says that they will help if there's an urgent issue with a federal agency. They promise this on their website. Use that to make your call to Congress and ask them to stop the demolition of these schools, whether it's Khan Al Ahmar or the other ones that are at risk. Also the houses, it can be that Congress intervenes. And if we have to ask one by one, let's ask together. We're able to hold special briefings with congressional offices to provide the details about each case. And it does matter when you make your calls as constituents. So I do want to urge everyone who's listening to contact your elected officials. They can call the Israeli embassy and they can call the US State Department and they will get answers. It does matter. I think that Khan Al Ahmar is standing today because of Congress making calls on behalf and writing letters on behalf of this village. There's another important question coming up about E1. Maybe Alon, could you explain why is Khan Al Ahmar important? Why does anyone pay so much attention on the Israeli government side to this little village that pre-existed all of the settlements around it. And Alon, are you able to get your audio?
Eid, you're speaking.
Oh, Eid is speaking, but we can't hear right now.
To connect between this area and Jerusalem and cutting the West Bank. This is the idea from the government.
Right. So that E1 is a plan that would remove the Palestinian communities and link the settlements together. Maybe also, Alon, could you explain that a little more?
Well, who told you who is going to taking the settlers? He gave him permission after same days, after 5 days, and same judge he to take the settlers, my neighbor, to building 92 homes between 300 meters between my villages and this area. He going to and he is going to take the settlers what he like. He takes another settlers, one settlers before 2 years ago, one settlers. He's going to build from the one settlers road and electricity and everything.
So
exactly. And if I take you to the Jordan Valley, one settlers he take him 1,400 dirham from the Palestinian. And the people, the private people who taking the settlers, but he don't he lose this he loses this the judge is taking this is from the settlers area. This is here in the West Bank, in the Palestinian here, not who is the judge in the who is the judge? The judge, he is same judge. He take the government to demolishing my community, Solberg. He is living in the settlers near Hebrew.
So the judge, who is himself a settler, has been actually really making it should be dismissed for conflict of interest, but instead is issuing decisions to take the village's land away, and at the same time to issue permits for expanding the settlement right above them.
He liking to take it now. He liking to take my villages near the Abudis where the rubbish, where he's making the land before 2 years ago. This is the idea from all the government here.
The forced relocation would put them next to the garbage dump.
Yes.
And the thing that we find that we really can be changed is that the village's own master plan is a great plan. It's something that everyone would be proud of. It assures their future. It allows their herding. It would make for a great economical base and something the neighbors would all be proud of. So it is important to emphasize that there is a resolution that's possible in all of this. Red, how are we doing on time? We're kind of running over here.
We're running over, so let's try to wrap up soon. And I am extremely impressed by technology that we have our guests from unusual locations, but thankfully the internet has been friendly to us today. We've had 2 guests from Gaza who have been live with us for an hour now. We have Alon, who's been live on his phone, and Eid, who is live from his tent, which I literally think is some futuristic miracle that we can speak to Eid from his tent in Khan Al Ahmar on a webinar. So it was really amazing to hear from all of these voices on the ground about developments in Gaza, the situation in Gaza, where there is a human rights crisis rooted in a political disaster. It was amazing to hear from Eid and Alon about the struggle for keeping Khan Al Ahmar at a time that the Israeli government has an unprecedented wave of demolitions. So it is for me, this was one of the richest webinars we've had for a long time. And I wish we had more time for it. I think, Donna, we should have a second part for this conversation, and hope that the internet will be as friendly as today.
Indeed. I really want to thank everyone for joining us and everyone who's been listening in. Please do stay in touch on the constituency side. There is a way forward. It is possible to ask Congress to intervene. Congressman Pocan, deep thanks to being able to sponsor this briefing for us and to bring these important voices forward. It's very important for all of us to be able to hear from them directly and then to be able to support human rights for the benefit of all, for the safety of all, hopefully for the safety and now during this time of COVID as well. Thank you so much, Ed, for making this happen.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Rebuilding Alliance. Thank you, Congressman Pocan. And of course, a special thank you to all of our guests on the ground in Palestine, from Gaza, from the West Bank. We really appreciate your voices. We will continue to do our best to ask our government here in the United States to stop supporting Israeli violations. And you keep up the great work.
Take care. Best wishes.